have been down to Lake Village. So if you give them an opportunity, I like for them to have just a minute or two to tell from their point of view, some of the stuff that they've encountered. If you'd allow them to do that, just for a minute. I thank you, all right?
Sure.
Hi, my name is Danielle. I'm the administrator for Lake County EMA. My part in Lake Village was I helped with the donations. Basically, it was just all day long. We were there from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. The community was just amazing. People wanted to come in to volunteer. Everyone coming to help everything off with supplies. I have to say the whole entire building was just filled. We had so much supplies for the whole community that towards the end of probably around like 4 o'clock, they did have to post on their social media for the community to stop bringing in donations. There was so much throughout the community. But the rock stars there the whole time were the women that actually were the volunteers, helping everybody, especially everyone that started coming in to take the supplies, because they were just so overwhelmed. They were crying. They didn't know where to start. So what the volunteers did is that they just literally were like their own personal shoppers. They would grab a bag for them. They would grab a tote for them. They would just start walking them around, helping them do what they needed to do for them. And from there, they would just, have a big sigh of relief. That they were actually there for someone that cared for them and helped them out. It was a very humbling and emotional experience, something I never experienced before, and I was glad to be there and helping the community for them and everything. So that was my job there.
I follow that. My name is Bill Russell. I'm the hazmat coordinator for Lake County. My partner and I were originally dispatched to help them out down in Newton County because there were some concerns of fuel being leaking from some of the gas stations that were hit by the tornado head on. While we were there, we were asked to go into the command, and we did, and they gave us a list of addresses that we were supposed to go to and visit and check out these large, I don't know if we all know, but there's large LP tanks that are set up for the houses out in the country. I mean, now some of those are 2,760 pounds heavy. And when my partner and I went to these addresses, we couldn't find some of the tanks. It was that destructive, that much wind for that tornado, that we found one in the woods. There was one sitting alongside a street. They were just scattered all over. But we checked all of those. We have some meters that we checked it. Then we went back to command and got some more addresses and spent the whole day out checking these tanks. Found a drum floating in a creek that had caustic in it. We found vans upside down in ponds. They give you an address to a house and you go there. The house wasn't there. All that was there might have been the LP because of the weight. The house was just gone. Down there, it's a lot of sand to build on. The water table is high, so they really can't do a lot of basement building. 95% of these homes were in slabs, and that's what I'm sure caused some of the damage. But the next day we went back down, did the same thing, reported to the command what we found. So I was down there yesterday for a couple hours, and I'm sure before this is over, we're gonna be down there again. But I gotta tell you, Lake Village, it's amazing how these people came together. I mean, it's a small town, and when the stuff hit the fan, everybody just came and helped out. I was gonna take some tools down there myself, and I was told, no, we've got plenty down there. but everybody was chipping in. The last I heard was that, they had about 16 computers going in the EOC, it's the Emergency Operations Command, and, now I think there's 7. They were able to scale that back down. As the days go by and the weeks, it'll get less and less, I'm sure. But it was an experience. I've seen a lot in the fire service, houses, you know, blowing up by gas or whatever, nothing compared to this unless you actually experienced it.
Wow.
They got a long road ahead of them. But that's how we got involved.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Ken. I'm the disaster preparedness coordinator here at Lake County. Prior to this, I was in the Navy for 20 years. I did search and rescue. And during that time frame, we did a lot of humanitarian efforts for different, hurricanes like Katrina, the Haiti earthquake, things like that. So disaster preparedness and response isn't really anything new for me. It's something that I've been doing, since my military career. And the one thing I learned that it's gonna sound harsh, but my disaster isn't your disaster, and your disaster isn't your neighbor's disaster. We all have different, beliefs and different values, and the way these things affect us differently. So for some people that we went down, we talked to, Lake Village, and even at the tornadoes last year here in Gary, they had the same damage, but some were affected differently. Their disaster it didn't equal their neighbor's disaster. And that's something that, as first responders, as volunteers and helpers, that we need to understand and understand what you're really going through at that time and what your need behind the need really is. So that's one of the things that I took away from the military and bringing into this, and I really appreciate it. I think what helps is having strong partners. During the Gary tornado, having a strong partner like Chief Terry in the back there and talking with the deputy mayor, we were able to coordinate things very quickly, very effectively, with them. And I think it got a really quick turnaround. And then seeing how the town of Lake Village is coming together, it's the same way. They understand that their needs aren't all the same, but they're all coming through it together. I think that's the biggest takeaway, is part of your preparedness. You can have all your supplies and everything, but it's your mental toughness and your mental preparedness to adapt, overcome, and improvise during these situations that really matters. So that's what we're here to do. So you call, we haul. Thank you.
Hi guys, my name is Paul Petrie. I can't say enough about these guys and Bob, our whole staff, the staff of Newton County, and everybody that came down there to help these people. It restored my faith in humanity. It really did. There had to be 150 volunteers just out there cutting up wood and helping all these people.
I thank you all for coming out. If you look on the chairs, together we've come up with a list of things that we really think are very important for preparation. So if you take, we've got enough flyers to go around, if you can take these and just put them in your areas, at your churches, anywhere. There are things that you can prepare for that we're recommending, that we found out after this event and after the event that happened in Gary, that if these things are practiced, we should have a better outcome. So right now, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Castro, and I thank you guys for coming. I thank you all for being here. Thank you so much, all right?
Good evening, everybody, and thanks for coming out. Fortunately, the clicker I brought isn't functioning correctly, so I'll try to go over to the screen. If there's any questions that you have, that you want me to kind of point something out on the screen more, I could walk over there. So I'll kind of do a mix of standing behind the podium to advance the slides and go over there. With this event last Tuesday, fresh in mind, I kind of was in the position, and first off, I've been at the Chicago office since 2010 now, and I'm originally a New Yorker. Originally from Queens in New York City. I don't think I've been told I don't have much of an accent anymore from New York, so But if you ever hear, if anything that I say sounds a little different than from Midwest, from this area, that's probably because the remnants of New York accent. But I've been here since the summer of 2010 and worked many events through the years. This particular event, is up there in terms of, magnitude. And just, I kind of was in the position of seeing it through from the forecast to actually being on the, I don't know if any of you with the county were on the conference call on the day of we had a conference call, it was like 800 people on it, afternoon of the event. And then was there until like the evening past when the worst of the tornado damage happened. Then the next day I was out on one of the surveys. I was not on the Lake Village portion, but farther west, Kankakee County, and the south portion of Kankakee into Aroma Park. Just everything that's been said already about Lake Village, same. And my perspective of when we're there and putting out alerts and communicating this information, making calls to downstream towns and stuff like that. The human side of it is when you get to go out and see, the horrific destruction that was caused. And there's a couple of different things that come to mind. It's why we do what we do and why we work together with our partners in emergency management and others in public safety about trying to help keep people safe and responding effectively when bad things do happen. But just that, when you see the scale, the magnitude of the destruction and, the tragedy of some people losing their lives, but that a lot showed that things worked really well. In addition, is that, this was high end for this area, and we didn't have worse casualties, right? Basically, that, so that says a lot of, and the rewarding aspect of doing something like this is seeing that we did make a difference that night, and everybody in this room involved in public safety and helping them with the response is, and we appreciate everything that, we've built much better partnerships, much better relationships. So, and having an opportunity out here to talk about, the severe weather forecasting and preparedness side of things, I think is especially prescient in terms of just having had an event like that, plus recently having had tornadoes right here in the Gary area, some scary stuff. I mean, until something like this happens not too far south of here, right? Then you see photos of that tornado right near some of the industrial areas close to the airport. That could have been worse as well. I mean, that was really bad. So then you see what weather can do. Not just the tornadoes, but the giant hail that happened, especially in Kankakee County. I mean, thank you all for coming out. I won't kind of further that. If there's anything off the top of my head that I can go into maybe later, and if you have any questions about some of the damage stuff that I've seen, we should have some time for that at the end. Maybe we could have, anybody in the room could ask questions specific to that about stuff, the survey process. Just because of the event having happened recently, we can talk about some aspects of it as well. I'm actually quite interested in the oil tanks being lofted. We are looking into some damage indicators that are kind of atypical in terms of figuring out what sort of wind speeds may have caused that, for future research purposes, for future improvements to the survey process. So, and I'm going to be involved in that moving forward here with this particular tornado. So I will probably reach back out to Lake County EMA about anything that you found from the work that you did down there in Newton County. So this session's beyond the warning. How many of you here have been to a spotter talk or another kind of preparedness type talk? Good, so a lot of you here. This is kind of a fusion of preparedness items, but we get down into, I think there's spotter aspects. We are gonna have a virtual spotter session coming up in a couple weeks. That's gonna be like the full-on spotter. This is the lead up to, is like the basics, the lead up to the events. And a really cool thing that we added this year is we walk through from the forecaster's perspective, when the outlooks go out and how we communicate the potential for dangerous severe weather, an event, recent event, how kind of a walkthrough of that. And that's after looking at some how to interpret radar data. So this is basically going to be a rehash of what I just said. But Thunderstorms 101 is the basics, the preparation side of things, and to have an event of this magnitude, going back to what I was saying just before, to have an event of this magnitude and to not have worse casualties than we had, and everyone is a tragedy again, but that there was a lot of work that went in on the preparation side, and people were prepared to take action if they needed to. So that's huge, and it's important for you, an important takeaway for you and anybody that that isn't well equipped enough to deal with the most dangerous weather that nature can throw at us. How to interpret radar data with everybody having access to their fingertips on smartphones and tablets, like more advanced apps to display this. It's a good opportunity to learn a little bit about what we're looking at on our end and to kind of understand stuff and to see what's coming your way that can help you planning from outdoor events. We work with public safety to help them plan for outdoor events, or if they're responding to an incident and need to know about the weather. But then it could come down to something as simple as you're having a family event, you want to know about weather. So it's kind of like you're doing your own weather support for your own event. Knowing how to interpret radar data is really important for that. And then finally, the forecast scenario, which I mentioned. So the basics of thunderstorms, it's simply warm and moist air being lifted into cooler air above it. So certain moisture, certain warmth to it, scientifically not going to get super nitty-gritty down to those details, but in essence, water vapor cooling, condensing the liquid water, then falling as rain, and of course hail as well in much taller thunderstorms. So the necessary ingredients. The first term you've probably heard before, since a lot of you have been to one of these talks, instability. We've been for years trying to come up with the best way to explain what's the best layman's term to layperson's term to kind of explain what does that really mean. Like, it when you feel it when you go outside on a warm and humid day, but it's in a layer above the ground. The rate at which the temperatures are cooling with height kind of defines an area that we can see as like the potential instability that can fuel a thunderstorm essentially. So in the larger the differential between the rising air from near the ground and the coolness of the air above it is the larger the potential instability. When we have larger instability, that's a necessary ingredient for stronger storms. When we have other ingredients, which I'll talk about. And then moisture, being lighter than dry air, less dense than dry air, that's why it's able to rise up above denser air above it. And most commonly here in the Western Great Lakes in the Midwest, our most common source of moisture for larger scale storm systems is going to come flowing northward out of the Gulf of Mexico, out of the Gulf, depending however you want to call it, right? But and it's basically these storm systems can just basically draw copious amounts of moisture northward into our region, and that's going to be there could be other inputs as well. You could have really long, cross-country storms that started with some like Pacific moisture. You can have other, but in general, when a storm crosses into the plains and then starts to emerge into the Mississippi Valley and points east, it's drawing moisture northward from the Gulf. And then lift is really important because you can have a really warm and humid day, but if you have it could be really warm and humid, but if the clouds are just puffy and look like fair weather clouds, that means there's not a source of lift to get that air rising. It's basically a way to activate the instability. And simple terms, cold fronts, warm fronts, other types of fronts, low pressure systems, upper level weather disturbances or jet streams. There can even be remnant, small scale cold fronts from previous thunderstorms can can kind of lay out and be a source of lift for new thunderstorms to form. You can even have boundaries that set up just based off where clouds are more prevalent than in other areas, like heating of the sun causes boundaries. So all these things can serve as sources of lift. And in an average year, these ingredients come together sufficiently about 50 times. It's important also to keep in mind that's independent of if this instability, moisture, and lift is based at the surface or above the ground, because in the case of at least up here in the northern portion of Lake County, most of Lake County on Tuesday's event last week, we were in the cool air north of the front, lake modified air. So those hailstorms that tracked across the Chicago metro were known as elevated thunderstorms. It means that there was plenty of instability aloft, but it was cool at the surface. So that's basically the difference there, is that when it's warm and humid at the surface, you kind of have what's known as surface-based instability. When it's noticeably cool, and that day the front came through and it was much cooler than just the day before. That was 70 the day before. So the lake, interesting thing about it is that we always get asked this question about how will the lake help us, or we try to ward against saying the lake will always help you, because it won't. But the fact of the matter is there are plenty of situations, especially earlier in the season, when the lake can help in terms of affecting the corridor where severe weather sets up, surface-based severe weather. So certainly had large hail in portions of the metro, but the corridor of intense severe weather was focused generally across the Kankakee River Valley. So you start out with a towering cumulus phase. So that's when the source of lift happens, when you have something to activate that instability, is your initially puffy clouds, maybe late in the morning, are starting to look a lot taller. If you've ever been on a trip to the tropics, there's like these tall but kind of vertically pointing clouds. That's towering cumulus as well. And then as it keeps rising, it reaches a mature thunderstorm phase, and that's when we've had condensation to form precipitation inside the cloud, inside what's known as the updraft. And that's the red arrows are known as the updraft. The downdraft is the blue arrows, and that punches out with that small scale front known as a gust front or an outflow boundary. And this is where rain and hail is coming out. So at the mature phase, what you have is a balance between the reds and the blues, essentially. The warm air and moist air rising upward in the updraft is balanced out with the cold air flowing downward with heavy precipitation. When you don't have something to sustain the storm, it's going to last on average about, let's say, an hour or so, maybe even a little bit less. And that will kick us into the next important ingredient in terms of severe weather. But when the cold air cuts off the warm air, when you're out of balance, then you get to your dissipation stage, where you have basically a remnant anvil. It looks like kind of mushier at the top. If you look at it, it looks like more fuzzy than if you see a mature thunderhead in the distance, it looks really crisp at the top. Like you kind of see the edges of it, and it like where it actually reaches sometimes 40, 50 plus thousand feet high. So, fourth ingredient for severe weather. This is really key. This is what we had in spades for last week's event, and certainly recent events here that dealt with tornadoes and or higher end damaging winds, is wind shear. Change of the wind in terms of its direction and or speed with height in the atmosphere. And what that does is, I'll go back to this quick. So what it's doing is, when you have it vertical, it's way easier for this punching underneath to cut off the reds, basically the warm air. You need something to keep this area of the storm separate from the blue, from the cool air. And how that happens is through wind shear. So it acts to prevent rain-cooled air from choking off the warm air feeding the thunderstorm. So it basically tilts the updraft away from the rain and the hail. Sometimes in really big storms like last week, you could have hail falling in the updraft because it's so big, it's giant. But in a shear environment, the tilted updraft occurs, the rain falls ahead of the updraft. And when you can keep it separate, you can have a storm last much, much longer than a single cell pulse type thunderstorm in the summer, in the heart of the summer months. And that's what we had last week. We had basically extreme or, more than sufficient magnitudes of wind shear, and that would be both wind speed and direction. It's gonna vary in terms of how the storms evolve, what type of form they take, like squall line or supercells, depending on some of the aspects of the, specific, unique to the shear on that particular day. In the case of last week, we had what's known as winds were basically turning counterclockwise with height in the atmosphere, and they were strengthening significantly with height from the low levels all the way up to way upstairs, and that's a really classic hallmark of a big time severe weather day. We had plenty of instability, and we had strong speed and directional shear. So, tornadoes. What is severe weather? In the enhanced Fujita scale. So this is, we probably will be able to, maybe in some of the future talks this year, we could update with some of the incredible imagery from last week. But this is another high-end tornado that happened now 11 years ago, a little bit under 11 years ago, out in northwestern Illinois, the Rochelle Fairdale tornado. This was almost as high as it gets on the scale. And a tornado, this is a good opportunity to explain something about tornadoes. I have tried to avoid saying the word tornado touchdown as much, because what we've learned a lot in the weather community, the science of it all, in the past decades, several decades, is that tornadoes are not descending. They're rotating updrafts, so they're rising here. So what you get is basically a ground-based circulation develops, and it hooks up with the rapid rotation inside the cloud, the parent cloud, what's known as the mesocyclone. And that's how you get a tornado, is the rotation that's already happening in the parent storm, the supercell in this case. There's ground-based rotation that develops as well because of air getting pulled in to the storm, let's say out of the southeast or something like that. It too starts to rotate because there's inherent spin near the ground, and that spin near the ground hooks up, there's other things going into, but the reason that, because the word touchdown kind of implies that it's descending out of the cloud, which descending air is cooler air. No, it's a rising warm air. There is the process of having, if you really read a lot about it, there's a term known as, I don't think we'll cover it specifically here, but what's known as the rear flank downdraft of the supercell, where it punches around. There's an aspect of it in terms of how the tornadoes form that's involved in that process. But in and of itself, the tornado itself is a rapidly rotating updraft with it that hooks up to the already strong rotation of the parent thunderstorm. So the tornado is just a smaller version of rotation already happening inside the cloud, and it's hooked up to ground level. It doesn't go like this. It starts and then they connect. It's almost kind of like a lightning strike. A lightning strike has to have a ground-based stroke connect with a cloud-based stroke to have a lightning strike, to have a cloud-to-ground strike. So it's not just a cloud-to-ground strike. You actually have to have an establishment of that channel of electricity. So the enhanced Fujita scale, anything above, anything. Another thing about this scale is you'll see some places online that'll say weak to strong to violent, destructive. Somebody gets hit by a tornado, their property gets hit, they deal with the situation. Using the word weak, to me, it just sounds almost disrespectful of it. So I just say not as strong, right? Like you lose trees, you get structural damage, your vehicle gets damaged by a weak EF1 tornado. It wasn't weak, right? So, but certainly in terms of destructive potential, the higher you go, the worse it gets. And we saw that, we're talking here, mid to high end EF3. And again, we're doing some additional analysis on tree damage and stuff like that. So whenever a big event happens, you can never rule out the possibility of some changes happening sometime down the line in terms of, you know, the official rating that was given. But right now we have an EF3, which is, as we saw, bad enough to cause just tremendous destruction. And you know, this tornado was almost EF5, top end 200 miles an hour. And then we have, you know, small hail, an inch in diameter, versus what will be, there's gonna be a process soon with the hail from last week. It'll be the largest hailstones on record in the state of Illinois. There's gonna be a process to certify that as well, over 6 inches, which is incredible, because anything that's solidly upwards of an inch is enough to cause car damage. And I can say that from experience, from my car being parked outside the office during a severe weather event, $10,000 later. So insurance paid, but you know what I mean. You know, wind blowing hail like 1.5 inches is really bad. 2-inch hail, baseball sized hail, is considered destructive hail. When we get up into the 3, 4, 5, 6 inch, that's giant. That's literally life-threatening hail. So in this event, we had high-end destructive tornado, and we also had high-end destructive hails from the same supercell thunderstorm. Severe weather, wind gusts. This is scaled to the knots scale of wind, which is like 1.2 or 1.12, higher than less than the miles per hour. So 50 knots corresponds to 58 miles an hour. We usually just say, call it near or above 60 miles an hour. Really, when it comes down to it, will it cause noticeable tree damage? And the higher it gets, then you start to get into potential for structural damage. Also flash flooding, so very common here near the Little Calumet River Basin. Flash flooding, it's partially related to the flashiness of the basin itself, but urbanized areas flood much more quickly because there's much soil for the water to run off in. So it's rapid water rise. The technical definition of flash flooding is when you have standing water that's at least 3 feet in depth that happens within 6 hours of the causative rain, and then I think it's at least 6 inches of flowing water. That's the terms of flash flooding. In terms of when we verify it as a flash flooding, when it happens quickly, it's pretty much a form of flash flooding, but it's not yet, like if it's only a foot of water, it's not yet to the level of what we call specifically flash flooding. One of the misnomers is that, you know, you see a lot of lightning, a vivid lightning display, you hear a lot of thunder, it means it's severe. That's not part of a severe storm definition. But another thing that we've learned a lot about, you know, especially having much higher resolution satellite data with the new GOES East that's been deployed within the last 10 years, is that that's also sampling lightning being generated by the storm. So it is the case oftentimes that an intensifying storm is showing signs of increased lightning activity. So it is, that's not me, right? Okay. It is a thing that an intensifying storm could have more lightning with it. But you could also have certain conditions like a very, very, very hot and humid air mass could have like more lightning than an average air mass in the springs per se. So that's why it's not used in terms of the definition of severe weather, is because you can have prolific lightning without severe weather. Then we get into some scary looking clouds that are not the same as tornadoes, and they're also not commonly visible on radar. And a lot of them develop through different processes. So gustnadoes can be seen. They're usually on the leading edge of like a more linear type thunderstorm, and they're most common to be seen out in open air kicking up dust. You'll actually see a little bit of rotation with it, but if it's not associated with a parent cloud above it, it's just going to be a gustnado, that basically an eddy that forms in the wind that's punching out from the storm could have some spin with it, and then it could enhance the winds a little bit, but it's not by definition a tornado. Cold air funnels or those shear funnels happen oftentimes in like near boundaries like lake breezes or just fronts stalled across the area. Usually in the heart of the summer months are pretty common, where we start to get reports of funnel clouds. That most of those are unlikely to become anything tornadic or dangerous. Water spouts are most common on the Great Lakes, more in the latter part of the summer, especially the fall when the lake is still warm and cold air masses start to come overhead. There is water spouts that form from supercells that are known as tornadic water spouts. That's different than what's being described right here. Those can actually make, those would develop in a similar way to regular tornadoes. They just happen to be over water. There can be cases of both water spouts and tornadic water spouts that they may come ashore briefly. If any sort of storm-based rotation comes ashore, it technically is a tornado at that moment. But if there's not a lot to sustain it, it'll probably weaken pretty quickly once it comes ashore. But tornadoes themselves, violently rotating, in contact with the ground, extending into the base of the rotating storm. That's why I started with the whole explanation of the ground up process. Is that when you say on the ground, it's just more of a colloquially to say it's in contact with the ground, as opposed to that it descended that it reached down to the ground. So here are some examples of cold air funnels on the left, and then, oh, I guess he didn't circle that one. That's a nice example of a water spout taken due east of Chicago. And then there's a gustnado. That one actually looks pretty interesting and pretty scary. So that one, you can see why that might be misidentified as a tornado because of the way it looks. So we might be more keen to times when these are more common, but you're usually not going to see nearly the same level of damage. You're probably just going to see general, like, if this was a severe line of storms with 50 to 60 mile an hour winds, you're probably not going to see much difference in the damage in that particular corridor. Knowing what to expect, severe weather-wise, it seems like the season is lengthened out a little bit. Tornadoes, April to August, I would say March is certainly, the main thing is that from the lows of the winter months, of the heart of the winter months, and even the late fall, November, December, you can see over there on the top, you can see, okay, you really start to pick up severe weather March, April, and especially May and June, and then it only slowly comes down after that. Hail also April to July, but really any severe storm, particularly supercells, is going to be capable of producing severe hail. This is kind of more the most common season is related to climatologically when they're most favored, as opposed to, if you get an intense supercell any time of year, it's likely to produce hail. So the damaging winds, those kind of offset more towards the latter part of the spring and the heart of the summer months. And then flash flooding generally peaks with the highest moisture content in the atmosphere, but certainly examples of that outside of it as well. So this is just I've kind of already touched on this a little bit, but kind of what you might see on radar, how they look. The single cell pulse, you can see that's very vertically oriented. So that's that classic on a day of last year, and when is that most common is going to be June, July, August time frame, where there's much. In June can have a lot of severe weather, but there could also be plenty of days that are pretty calm, like wind-wise, through thousands of feet of atmosphere. And days like that can have plenty of storms, but they're more likely to be disorganized. If there's a lot of instability, they can still produce short-lived severe wind gusts and even instances of severe hail. Then you get multicellular kind of line up a little bit. Start to see trend higher in terms of shear. The higher end squall lines, which we're very familiar with here, that's even higher shear. Those squall lines can happen with days that have similar magnitudes of shear as days with supercells. So it's not necessarily like that squall line is just, shear is a little bit less, therefore squall line versus over supercell. It's just that in general, the higher end supercell type days are going to have, the most organization, more shear, but squall lines themselves, especially derecho types, certainly can have impressive wind shear. So single cell thunderstorms. And again, don't just think that let your guard down when you have a pulse low shear day that you're not going to get severe weather. Maybe there'll be plenty of days that don't, but usually when they come down, when they collapse, they produce some sort of wind response. The taller they get really defines how much wind can come out, really. So the hail is usually lower end, the damaging winds, you can get pretty significant in localized corridors and known as microbursts. They're really common, 20 to 30 days on average per year. So almost an entire month of summer, worth out of the year, an entire month worth almost, and some in more years than others. That's what it looks like. You got a lot of boundary. You got the lake breeze coming in, and you just have some just loosely defined storms going up farther inland. This is multicellular, similar in terms of the severe weather threats from these. Kind of more looser organization drifting south, but more focused corridor. And certainly flooding can be an issue with these as well. And they're quite common, up to around 2 weeks worth of these per year. Then squall lines, highly organized. So these can have, a whole gamut of severe threats. Flash flooding would be tied to the movement in terms of how fast along the ground it's moving. If it slows down, or if a portion of the storm slows down, then it could have severe weather. It could have flooding. But our most prolific in terms of numbers, tornado producers, are usually these squall lines. And they're also quite common. In fact, here in this part of the Midwest, we're kind of one of the hot spots for squall line type storms. This one would have been an example from back in 2014 that had a bunch of tornadoes in the Kankakee River Valley and some north into the Chicago metro. This is the special class of squall line type thunderstorms, derechos. And it's based on how much ground they cover in terms of continuous damage being caused. So damage and or severe gusts, 60 plus miles per hour. This was August 10, 2020, particularly intense derecho that was at its most intense wind-wise across eastern Iowa and northwestern Illinois. And then it went on to become a pretty prolific tornado producer here in the northern Illinois, northwest Indiana, northeastern Illinois, northwest Indiana. So this is just a composite showing the derecho as a tract. It started out near the Missouri River and it tracked all the way across the state of Indiana into Ohio. It did weaken by then, but we had, I think, at least 20 tornadoes out of it in our area. These are all looked on satellite. So squall lines and derechos often have a shelf cloud with them. We got a lot of photos like this that help us teach in terms of what you would expect with a squall line to look for. But better to when you get the warning, better to probably rely on others' photos of them, because if you could actually see the shelf coming nearby, if it's going to have severe wind with it, then it's not long until that point arrives when the severe winds hit. So. There is some risk involved in being able to take photography of this nature. So, of course, there's one from our office. So the trained meteorologist taking photos outside, but this one was probably far enough away. But just some excellent examples that we get. This one was all the way back in 2010, but a great time lapse of a. This was a higher end storm back in June of 2010 that actually blew windows out of the Sears Tower, aka Willis, or whatever it's called now, but it blew windows out of of high rises in Chicago back in mid-June of 2010, about a month before I got here and started my career at the Chicago office. So I think probably 80 plus mile per hour winds with this. Another really fascinating loop, the billowing, turbulence. A lot of times we get spotter reports that say they're seeing possible tornadic activity in the shelf area, and you can see why in this loop. Those little fingers kind of hanging down, you know, a lot of the turbulence. Most of the time, the shelf area isn't going to be where you look for. You usually can't see the tornadoes coming out of these. They're usually going to be shrouded in rain. But if you do see something that looks like it, if it's associated with the shelf, it's probably just turbulence on the leading edge. Supercells, and explain this already a little bit. Rotating updraft, mesocyclone, small scale cyclone. So all storms have some sort of rotation with them. So the large low pressure systems, certainly hurricanes in the northern hemisphere, are going to rotate counterclockwise. But you could actually have smaller scale mesocyclones rotating both directions. Much more common for counterclockwise, but you can certainly have clockwise, which is anticyclonic rotation for these storms. So so damaging. I mean, you could have. We said 1 to 5, and then we got 6-inch hail last week. So we're gonna have to up this in terms of our future updates to this slide. Destructive winds in the downdraft area of the storm, and just the whole range of tornadoes out of these, and they also could be prolific flooding, flooding rain producers, especially if they're slow moving. And relatively rare these in terms of days that are predominantly supercells, as what we're seeing. Generally less than a week per year, so a lot more common than the other types. And this was added in from last week already. So my colleague Brett was working overnight shifts this past week, and he was the one who put this updated presentation together and was able to get this radar loop into the new slide. So nice touch added here. This is when it was going through Roma Park, as you can see there, and then soon after we'll go into Lake Village. So here we go. This is one of the smaller examples of hail from that storm. And again, we're looking at examples that are once confirmed or likely to, whatever the largest of those that's verified, that was maintained, that was kept, that was stored properly, and then go through the process of judging it with a committee involving the state climatologist. There'll likely be an announcement about a new state record for Illinois, for the state of Illinois, hail size wise. This is a great loop because you can really see the rotation that's occurring in these storms. So the barber pole type aspect of it as you look higher up in the sky, and and then if it is a tornado as well, but you have your if you put aside the fact that this is producing, but you can clearly see on this time lapse that this is rotating at the storm scale as well and deep up into the atmosphere, and then you have your smaller scale lowering as known as a wall cloud, and then if you do have a tornado, it's in that general area. So now, since this isn't a full-on spotter, and I do recommend virtual classes coming up later this spring for additional spotting techniques, but hopefully you learn enough for the basics on it, from what we already have gone through. But for the purpose of this talk tonight, we're going to step through the preparation process that can help you stay safe and help others as you kind of help teach them as well. Be a force multiplier in terms of helping people stay weather ready for things like what happened last week. So step one, and it's also good to go through a routine of these, have checklists, anything you need. So the planning phase, what is a hazard to you? So depending where you live, some things are going to be hazards to you that aren't going to be to somebody that that lives nearby. So do you live in a particularly flood-prone area? That's something to always keep in mind. Do you live in a mobile home or a less resilient home that's more susceptible to thunderstorm winds? Any mobile home is not considered adequate at all shelter in terms of a tornado. So or even like manufactured homes that are not super well that are not super well attached. One of the things we say oftentimes is treat the tornado watch like your warning to make sure you're at a safe place if the storm does hit, as opposed to, because if you're waiting to take shelter, if it's not in a designated shelter in a mobile home park, or if you're in a home that's not adequately strapped down enough, that's not built to withstand speeds like that, you want to be able to access your shelter like well beforehand. So that might mean going to a friend or family or a loved one's house, or an area, a designated shelter area. Developing a severe weather plan is huge. Putting a home safety kit together, having extra shoes, any sporting helmets that you have, being that flying debris is the biggest killer, and these are source of debilitating injuries is going to be life-threatening injuries is going to be flying debris in your head. So helmets, absolutely. So having that ready to go in your shelter, and then ensuring you have multiple ways to get weather information. And redundancy being key here. So with wireless emergency alerts that have been out for quite a while now, and so much of the population having smartphones, it does help in terms of that being one of them. But you never know with cell service as well. So it's always still good to have other redundant means. And something like a weather radio to wake you up, because it is a common thing now as so many people spend literal hours per day on mobile devices. You want to get off the grid at night, how are you going to get woken up in the event of dangerous severe weather, something like a weather radio? Because you may not live close enough to that outdoor siren, because sirens are for outdoor purposes. So relying on those isn't ideal either. And identifying trustworthy sources of forecast information. So I work for the National Weather Service for the taxpayer, $4 per year on average, but we're not here to say you must follow only Weather Service forecasts at all. So people have favorite sources of weather information or multiple favorite sources, but how to parse between what would be considered trustworthy when it comes to severe weather. Knowing where to go when sheltering. So did any of you were nearby with the tornadoes that hit near here that had to do this? So it was mentioned before, the sandy soil area south of here, a lot of them don't have basements. So the key there, really, if you do have a basement or not, is low as possible in the building you're in. Unless there's like a fortified shelter in the upper of more of a high rise, they might have like fortified locations that may not necessarily be as low down, because they may just be, really, really well constructed building might have like the inner stairwell area, maybe a safe place to be. So this is more so in like in single one or two family residences or smaller places of business and whatnot. You want to get to the most interior room and the lowest portion of the building you're in. Top floor rooms are going to be most susceptible to destruction. Anything that's exterior or has windows won't protect you, and then certainly no place outside will adequately protect you either. So if your basement is your safe place, that's where you put your supply kit. If you otherwise, if let's say a closet or an interior bathroom is, hey, have that readily available to you. Road safety is a big one as well. Living in a hugely populated metropolitan area, or just in general road travel, is the what to do and what not to do. And a lot of this has to do as well with, we've had questions like, well, what if the tornado's crossing the road and you're sitting in traffic? Well, the important part there is the preparation, is knowing what to expect in a given day. If you do have flexibility to not drive on a certain day that you were planning to drive, you could work from home. If you can postpone for a day, planned travel that you had across larger distances, the way to avoid being stuck on 94 or any one of the interstates in the metro, or any you know, congested road is don't drive that day in the first place. So, you know, paying attention to the weather that might occur. And that would go as well for, you know, huge hail coming across the road. If you're stuck in traffic, you have really nowhere to go, right? So, but if you are stuck in this situation, it's important to know where designated shelters are on the sides of the road. So plan that out ahead as well. Or know a friend's house to go to if you are driving a longer distance. Know where you just really have multiple options, because you definitely want to get off the road. And what not to do is seeking refuge in your vehicle. So you know, sitting underneath an overpass, that's like one of the bigger no-nos. You know, there's examples of people living through those situations, but you could block out emergency vehicles. There could be debris kind of pummeling underneath them. So like wind tunnel effect, it just does not provide adequate shelter. Small windowless room or hallways in the lowest floor of a sturdy building. So it's knowing that. The easiest one to say is, hey, you didn't drive that day, right? But like things that you can do if you get stuck in this situation, if you're driving and you have a way to get off, you're not necessarily stuck in traffic. You get the wireless emergency alert on your phone, you hear it on the radio, is kind of activate the plan that you set up for your drive. Never go under a tree either. That goes for all other types of weather, like lightning. You know, you can be killed or seriously injured by flying debris from the powerful tornadic winds. And one thing we're not mentioning here is, you know, lying flat in a ditch or a low spot, because that's still not a safe option per se. There might be like last resort options, but you're already in a life-threatening situation if your last resort. You're still you're remaining in a life-threatening situation if your last resort is to lie flat in a ditch or a low spot for multiple reasons. You can't guarantee your safety. Second part is ditches or low spots in the presence of heavy rain can fill up quickly with water. And that's something that has absolutely happened in the past is you had people that were doing that last resort shelter and were found tragically drowned by flash flooding that developed after the storm moved through. So, you know, just lots of not good options, but the best way is to know have an idea in advance of what to expect, so that that you're set up for success in that situation. And this is nighttime. You know, it says turn on, but you know, we can't be like, well, we're in the weather safety business. You have to do this. If something works for you to get better sleep at night and not go on your phone, but maybe better if your significant other is able to lay off the phone, and somebody having one on is a good idea. But if you prefer to have it that way, you know, having something to wake you up, but certainly a wireless emergency alert from an active device is going to be great. Also having flashlights and sturdy shoes on hand, because you know you hear plenty of stories about people quickly having to, you know, it's dark, you know, you're woken up, you know. Back in 2021, I was at the office for this one, but my area where I live in Naperville, Illinois, had a tornado less than a mile north of my house. Right, my wife slept through it, unfortunately, and for whatever reason, the wireless emergency alert. But it's like when you're sound asleep, right? You're disoriented. You know, you want to have stuff near you, and that goes to like when you go to bed. If there's a threat of severe weather, be prepared for that possibility as well. So, what you're needing to be able to take action when you're suddenly woken up is not the easiest thing to do, because when you first wake up, you might not be thinking as clearly as during the middle of the day. So having things on hand as well, and having a flashlight, power might get knocked out. So daily weather assessment. This, I've already kind of touched on this, but so one of the most ubiquitous things that's referenced is the Storm Prediction Center outlooks. This being an example of progression from back in late March of 2023 was higher end regional severe weather outbreak. How it progressed through the days in the outlooks. You've probably heard different terminology used for severe weather risks or threats, depending on which outlet in the private sector, or if it's being referred to by the category name. for our purposes here, and something that we've been doing while here at the Chicago office, and I think has gotten more prevalent across the agency, is just thinking of the numeric levels and the colors, because this often ties to other danger scales, terrorism, threat levels, stuff like that, that, 1 to 5, and below that being general thunderstorm type days. So your relative threat where you are is going to basically escalating with the increase in threat levels. So the reason I say kind of shy away from the terminology is, I don't know how everybody else feels here, but I'm not sure if moderate is a more urgent word than enhanced. I'm not sure if slight is a more urgent word than marginal. This is what they've come up with and used for years, but we haven't done informal surveys of it, but I think that high is probably the only one that's definitely, and I think enhanced sounds worse than moderate, because you can think of things that, in moderation, and then to say a level 4 is a moderate, it's like, so when we advertised the upgrade to a moderate level 4 risk in part of our area last week, we were emphasizing the level 4 or 5 and said, okay, yes, it is still called a moderate risk, but if you were kind of, confused a little bit by it, if you know people who are, tell them, forget about the names, think about the numbers. Whatever, like the Weather Channel's own scale that they use, stuff like that, right? Whatever it's used, they're using numeric scales. So think of it that way, because, we're not the sole proprietors of things like this. It's fair game certainly to have other, scales or something similar to what we have, but a lot of the time there's going to be numbers and colors tied to them, and that's probably the best way to think of them, as opposed to being all caught up in what the exact category name is. Our website, good source for graphics that are going to kind of hone in on the threat, give some information, including expected storm motions, meaning traveling towards general direction. Usually in our area, it's going to be generally towards the east or northeast or southeast, most of the time with storms. Maybe sometimes that north-south, it's kind of rare to get anything going back towards the west. But we'll have a graphic that goes through most common hazards if severe weather does occur, the focus area based off the severe weather outlooks issued by the Storm Prediction Center. And these also are available on our social media. And if you go to weather.gov/Chicago, that bottom left portion of the page is going to have all available graphics that day as well. And we also have these decision support packets. We might have some additional information on there in our briefing slides, plus the graphics that are available on the website. We have a hazardous weather outlook. The graphical form of it will look something like that. Again, the colors kind of hone in. And we've actually moved away from what the terminology is in our own hazardous weather outlook, because it was other terms used to express severity. So just more ways to confuse, to trip people up. So we firmly went with the levels of the threat levels for that. And there's a text form and the graphical form to correspond with it. And we also have a storm motion. This particular day, this probably would have been an example of a higher end. Let me see. This would have been probably, this would have been like after a late summer heat wave, a higher end severe weather setup. Probably the one back in 2020 when it was excruciatingly hot in late August. The end of that that heat wave. So basically, the orange colors would correspond to the higher end damage and wind threat. And also, if you're so inclined to learn more about the science of things, we have our kind of forecast or reasoning in terms of what we're messaging. And that's known as the forecast discussion. Other resources. Certainly, broadcast meteorologists still a great resource. They have a direct conduit to information that we're sharing as well. Just like the emergency management community here with us, through our NWS chat platform, we have a direct conduit, information coming our way, information being shared. So they're great resources as well, absolutely. Apps, wireless emergency alerts are geared towards tornado, higher end flash flood, higher end severe. So you do have a whole set of situations that aren't necessarily going to alert unless you set up things on your phones. So like lower end, not that they're not dangerous, but lower end severe storms, lower end flash flooding isn't going to alert with a audible tone on your phone, maybe on a weather radio. And then social media, it's just make sure you're following trusted sources. That's key. There's lots of technology has given us so much, but it also has created a lot of, it's hard to kind of parse between what is trusted, what isn't, in terms of what's being shared online. So that's really what that means. And private sector companies as well can provide tailored forecasts. When we get into the monitoring mode, we have mesoscale discussions. We have the tornado watches that are issued. This would be right from last week's event. So the discussion that went out when the watch was issued, and we specifically tailored it to the areas that we thought had an actual tornado threat because we were definitely concerned about large hail north of the front in the cool air. The original watch went out for Lake County with a severe thunderstorm watch. The reason we upgraded later in the evening was because there was enough concern when the supercell was over, when it was approaching northwest Indiana, that it could that there could be tornadic activity crossing the Kankakee River. We weren't concerned about up here in Northern Lake, but we don't have the ability to split up counties to that degree. So that's why there was a change in the watch that was issued that night, was because we did not want to cut it too close that a destructive tornado was in areas that didn't have a tornado watch. So that's why we made that pivot at that time. It didn't really change the threat up here. It was mainly just for like far southern portions of the county right on the river. It turned out that the activity stayed south of the river, but it was close enough, we felt like, to make that change. So when you get a watch, there's going to be information about it, as you're getting into your monitoring mode. On our end, we have forecast products, the severe weather threat wise. So I had a hand in putting this together as well. Tornado threat, it was basically like near south of dash line. It ended up being kind of like a little bit north of that, certainly, but close, but in the red area. So those areas are certainly fair game. And then we also did do graphics for tailoring in terms of time of arrival for squall lines. These are our graphical nowcast products. Or graphical forecast is more of an outlook, and then that's a timing product for the arrival of dangerous storms. And then radar-wise, we'll get into the specifics in terms of interpreting radar, but what website or app is best? All NWS radar data, so all the NWS Doppler radar network are transmitted from NWS offices. We also have a network of FAA terminal Doppler radars that are available on most apps as well. We do not have, unless given otherwise, we don't have access. We might be granted in some situations, like some of the smaller radars that are set up by some of the TV stations, but our radar data is all exclusively going to be our radar right next to my office in Romeoville, or the terminal Doppler radars. Anything that relies on these Doppler radars is going to simply pull from our feed. So it's repackaging what's already freely available. But most important things to have is being able to have a clear indicator of your location GPS-wise. Being able to plot warnings is important as well. And to loop an animation is important as well. And there's going to be payments involved in terms of more advanced stuff, but there's plenty of perfectly fine basic apps that work well for the purposes of daily weather monitoring. Even some of the more advanced apps have one-time payment sort of modes that are actually really good still. So you're not, just by getting into like one of those apps, you're not necessarily like shelling out $100+ a year. There's ones that are much more affordable than that. So I cannot specifically, as a NWS employee, government employee with a public private, I can't specifically promote, but I can, as a private citizen also here talking later, I can say what I use, but I cannot right now promote those specific products. Other resources, again, you know, they might cut into your favorite show, but they provide really good wall-to-wall coverage during severe weather. And they may be specifically referring to information that's coming directly from the NWS office. So an example of that was, I believe, you know, they might have had their tablets on air back in the July of 2024 derecho coming across the area. I was on NWS chat. I think I put out like several hundred messages that night, and they were reading stuff on air. So at one point we said it seems like there might be at least 10 tornadoes in progress at once, which was kind of crazy. And if I'm not mistaken, that might have been read out loud on air by one of the meteorologists. So they're great for localized messaging. Live streams from spotters, from chasers, from TV stations, just make sure it's a trusted source. And same thing here, kind of same list as before. Stay up to date is the main goal. And what are the difference between a watch and a warning? It's, you know, the ingredients have come into place, but it doesn't mean a storm yet is imminent. It's the watch, be prepared, be ready to activate your plan. Warning is severe weather is moving into the area, take action. This is a tornado warning when that went out right in the Chicago metro for a supercell that was tracking down the lake breeze. Thankfully, it did not actually produce any destructive tornadoes. We were really concerned about this one. It did produce some higher end straight line wind damage, but in a couple of weaker tornadoes, I use the word weak, but they were really on the lower end, but this could have been a really bad situation back in 2022. And then action. Oh, and another thing that's not shown here in this presentation, but you may see it elsewhere in safety preparedness talks, is a way to explain. A kid would love this. It's the watch phase is like when you have ingredients assembled to cook something, right? So pizza, tacos, cupcakes. You have the ingredients set out before you put them in the oven. That's your watch phase. You got them together, but they're not yet imminent. When it's ready to go out of the oven, then that's your warning phase. And so when a severe thunderstorm warning is issued, course of action to take: moving indoors away from windows. If you get a wireless emergency alert for that particular warning, that's going to mean 80+ mile per hour winds and or 2.5 inch or larger diameter hail. So for the run-of-the-mill, 60 mile an hour, could still be bad, could still down tree limbs. Moving indoors away from windows, you should be okay. But any WIA alerted severe storm, treat it like a tornado warning. And during severe storms, you can, as long as you're safely away from windows, you can continue some indoor activities. Again, unless you're in more of a life-threatening situation. This is an example of a microburst last summer, actually, in Linwood, Illinois. Maybe I could pump up the sound. Oh, it looks like it's all the way up. Boom. Yeah, that quick. So very quick, something like it really doesn't matter. This happened to be a microburst, but it could be so quick how this happens. So the action is don't wait on it, and said it many times. This probably looks like it was more of a Nest or a Ring type cam. Being out, providing footage that we use for teaching is good and all, but absolutely any source of footage that involves standing outside on a covered porch still means you're putting some risk there. So it's better to, instead of getting the videos, to take shelter adequately. Tornado warning, taking cover. And again, that's where it's great. You want to know more about, how dire the threat is per se. treat tornado warnings a life-threatening situation, but then you know, if you're looking for additional information, having that feed or, feed from a broadcast meteorologist, again, they might be communicating information that we're sending as well. If you, in the warning itself, if it says confirmed tornado, that tells you this is confirmed, this is happening. When it's radar based, we haven't yet confirmed the existence of a tornado, but rotation is strong. But, you don't want to take a chance because it could go quickly from strong rotation to, damaging tornado in not a long time. And that did happen with last week's event. So waiting until hearing sirens or seeing the tornado out your window is waiting too long. Sirens, again, can't emphasize this enough. We hear a lot about sirens. Another important thing is that we have no say in terms of the local siren policies. The only thing that we might help with is we might help set up a municipality in terms of something that automates the process to activate sirens when a warning goes out. Like if the polygon includes the siren area, we could hone in on that, but we might help with that. But otherwise, when the sirens are activated is not something, so, and where you can hear them from or times in which the sound might be more muffled than others. That's why waiting for that siren or reacting strictly to a siren could go off for a storm that's like 10 miles away from you too, right? Depending on the siren policy. So the sirens can also be like a false alarm if you don't get a wireless emergency alert on your phone. Flash flood warning, best way to stay safe is just avoiding travel. If you are already traveling, it's just avoid roads in which, that are flooded. You can't see how deep it is. Any barriers, of course. Higher end situations, WIA alerts, widespread flooded roadways, and potential for flooded basements quickly flooding. Low levels of buildings may flood in some higher end situations. I think there were some pretty high end ones last year in the summer. And just in the past few years, we've had a lot of these localized, 6-inch plus type rain. But really, the best way to stay safe is just do not travel, or just avoid areas that are flood prone if you are already traveling, or if you're able to just get home. If you get an alert, just avoid those flooded roads and just get home, and you'll stay safe. There's not really, we don't have we don't have a lot of terrain, so there's not the wall of water type stuff usually, where having water flowing downhill accelerates it. The really dangerous stuff like what happened in Texas last summer. In most of the flooding, even higher end rain events, just by staying home, you can stay safe per se. You might have to even if water gets in, you could go upstairs, stuff like that. So, wireless emergency alert. Let's see.
Hello, this is Mike Kerr.
Is there a way to get the
You
sound?
probably that hand mic, put it by your speaker.
Oh, true. Just this mic right here?
Coordination meteorologist here at the National
This
Weather
won't
Service
turn
in
on.
Wisconsin. I wanted to briefly talk about WIAs, or wireless emergency alerts.
Maybe that didn't.
WIAs are short emergency messages from authorized federal,
Can you hear a little better?
authorities that can be broadcast from cell towers to any enabled mobile device in a locally targeted area. They warn the public of an impending disaster, providing immediate, life-saving information without the need to download an app or subscribe to a service. There are a few different types of wireless emergency alerts. Presidential alerts are a special class of alerts only sent during a national emergency. Imminent threat alerts include extreme weather alerts originating from us here at the National Weather Service, as well as some other threatening emergency situations. And Amber Alerts are urgent bulletins issued in child abduction cases. Because of their critical purpose, WIAs are designed to get your attention with a unique audible tone and vibration sounding like this. Some WIAs are triggered by the National Weather Service for higher-end weather threats, such as tornadoes, significant flash flooding, or destructive severe thunderstorms. simply, wireless emergency alerts can save your life. We at the National Weather Service hear that repeatedly when we're out performing damage surveys. When it comes to severe weather, especially at night, receiving a wireless emergency
I've been okay without the mic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I sometimes talk a little too loud in the mic, so. So there's a lot of social science studies that have gone on in the wake of devastating severe weather events. There's a lot of, when there's interviews done, waiting to hear the sirens, seeing a picture of or video of the tornado, seeing the tornado themselves headed your way. The thing is that even if we try to hone in on the area being affected within the tornado warning, the warning polygons themselves are always going to be larger than the damage path. There's just no way, like this tornado that happened last week at its widest was just under a mile wide, probably, possibly wider in spots once we fully compile the data. The smallest tornado polygons are much larger than that. There's just no way that we can draw something that's so. Because we also have to account for the possibility of fluctuations in motion too. So even if you do get missed, but you do find out that a destructive tornado went near you, it might have just meant it happened to track that way. It might have went, south or north of the previous path that it had. So saying that, there's a common phrase, never thought it happened to me. It's because of the localized nature of severe weather. So even higher end situations, there's a localization in terms of who gets it worse, right? So getting the absolute worst on a given day in a year is extremely rare and a low probability occurrence. So the chance of it happening to you more than once or a couple times is not that high, right? So any given area, even on higher end severe weather days. So when you do get a warning, when you do get a tornado warning, take action, activate your plan, and make sure you did practice it as well. So now we get into interpretation of radar data. This is the coverage of NextRad, the NWS Next Generation Dopplers. These were all deployed in the early to mid 90s. And then they've been upgraded along the way. We have higher resolution available to us than we first did when they first came out. Over the course of my career, the capabilities with these, we've kind of like maxed out even more so what we can do with these and what we can see and how quickly we can see it. But you can see, I'll go over there to explain like how this, so the coverage of the lowest level of the radar, that's the yellows. That's basically within 4,000 feet at ground level with that particular radar. The closer to the ground, the more detail we can see. The farther you get out from radar, hopefully no Flight Air Society members here, but because of the curvature of the Earth, a radar beam that's close to horizontal, it's slightly above horizontal, is going to be pointing out farther above the ground, the farther away from the radar you get because of the curvature of the Earth. So, there's radars out there. You look out west, and I don't know if over here you can see. There's like holes or gaps in the radar coverage. There's a prominent one. The closest prominent one to here is going to be in far extreme western Illinois, northeast Missouri. That's a pretty prominent one right there, where the lowest. The nearby radar is the lowest radar level can only see 10,000 feet up. So, and that's where it fills in, where we get, the fill in the blanks, so to speak, from spotters, from public safety. That's why it's really important. We're lucky here that we have our radar close by in northern Will County, Illinois. We have the terminal Doppler radars, even closer to here. The Midway terminal Dopplers in southern Cook County. That's the best view possible here in Northwest Indiana from that. You got a question?
Yeah, the radars, is this, like, they're the ones that are measuring, like, velocity and, like, reflectivity and stuff?
Yeah, that's coming up. Yep.
So the gap is saying that, like...
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so what's not being missed is like a tall storm, you'll see it, right? So you'll know a storm is severe. There's other things we're using like satellite, we're gonna be getting reports for these things, but seeing what's happening near ground level, what's key about that, it's rotation and magnitudes of wind speeds coming out of the cloud, out of the parent cloud. The higher it is, the less detail we're gonna have at the most important levels. The lower the radar scan, the closer to the ground, the more detail we're gonna have. So anything within relatively close range. So here in northwestern Lake County, even our radar, I think it's still under 1,000 feet above ground level. We're seeing those details. Like, I think we're still talking like what we're seeing on radar is like 900 to 1,000 feet up, if I'm not mistaken. The Midway Terminal Doppler is going to be seeing stuff like a couple hundred feet above the ground. So that helps us a lot versus 10,000 feet, right? So we're lucky. We have also surrounding radars that provide good coverage of the area. We can use them to supplement. We could also, in the case of unexpected outages, we're just here in an area that has much better radar coverage versus some other, out west, up in the north central U.S. and northern plains. There's large areas that do have larger gaps. So they do have to make do. So just like any other office in terms of the warnings. So and it says right here on the bottom of beam height, basically. So there's things that happen, like when you see this degraded of this picture over here, it's known as beam blockage, and that's caused by the mountains. So if there's mountains in the way, they're gonna, and the radar is at a certain height, and there's mountains above that height, yeah, it's not gonna see through the mountains. That's called beam blockage. Here's the terminal Doppler radars. Oh, and so this is inside our radar dome, our radome it's called. This is for size reference, you can see my coworker, Will, one of our technicians, electronics techs, he's probably my height, a little shorter. So that gives you a reference how tall, this is the dish inside the dome. Our radar dome being the big soccer ball, volleyball looking thing, if you've ever seen one in person. So going back to the terminal Dopplers, you can see these are much more localized and mainly near major airports. So being in the Chicago area, one of the busiest airspaces in the world, in the country, in the world, we have not one but two terminal Dopplers. We also have Milwaukee just to our north that helps us in certain situations as well. So you can see that there, this exactly goes back to what I was explaining about lowest radar viewing angle, midway here. And then the pink colors are where it's lower for K-lot, which is the 3-letter term or 4-letter for radar at my office. Then you have the other terminal Dopplers. The farther you get out, then you get into the range of the other NWS radars. And also up there in interestingly enough, in extreme northeastern Illinois, you have areas that are in closer viewing range of the Milwaukee terminal Doppler radar. When we do have an unexpected outage of our radar, we have really good coverage from the terminal Dopplers, and we also supplement with the NWS radars. So the way it works for reflectivity and even how this is turned into velocity data, the radar is basically sending out a pulse of energy, constant pulses as it's spinning and rotating. It listens for return energy off of reflective particles. Precipitation being chief among those, but certainly also non-precipitation echoes, in unfortunate cases, debris, but also even insects, birds. On calm mornings, very, very calm mornings, we could actually detect moving cars on radars. It's pretty cool. But so it's just listening, and it's just what gets sent back to it. And in terms of radar reflectivity, more raindrops means they're more reflective, and it generates a higher reflectivity. If the beams are bouncing off of hail, that's really high reflectivity. So that's really going to show up on in terms of what you see on radar. And that's why we call it radar reflectivity. More reflectivity, so like when it's snowing, just to take a non-thunderstorm example, you know, like a light snow will be what you normally look at in a radar display. It's just a lighter shade, like a green or a light blue or something like that. And then the darker colors are the more reflective. And then sometimes you get in heavy bands, you might see yellows even for snow. So just general basic radar reflectivity. So immediately your eye gets drawn to the warmer colors. That's the more reflective areas. So you can envision that there's at least heavy rain wherever you see the warmer colors. The yellows, the oranges, the reds, the whites, in between those, and then the greens are going to be associated with usually light to moderate precipitation. So difference between that and that and that. And then the other thing is that we're looking at is we're scanning up as well. So our radar is not only, you know, the lowest level is near horizontal, but its beams are shooting out and up. So when we look up, we're looking at higher heights. And when we see things like higher reflectivity aloft, we could be picking up on what's known as hail cores, or at least just like more intense precipitation with height. And when we see stuff like that, not only are we looking at a potential for larger hail, but when we see a lot of like the really high reflectivity suspended aloft, at some point gravity will win out, and that's a case in which all of a sudden you get a sudden drop in that mass of higher reflectivity can suddenly surge out and cause stronger winds, especially in like a collapsing storm. But in this case, this storm, as we scan higher, was producing tennis ball sized hail in that particular storm. I think it said it pops up there. So it already looked interesting enough at ground level or near ground level, but as it got even higher, you can see what's really happening up there. And then it did end up going on to produce 2.5 inch or baseball sized hail, or near baseball sized hail. So we could actually slice across and see what's happening. So we're looking upward, but you can also do a cross section and see that. So here's, you know, you were seeing these colors basically near ground. Up here, you had all that large hail suspended. And eventually, again, gravity wins out. This is being suspended by updraft speeds, sometimes in excess of 100 miles an hour, but the bigger the hail, it's going to come down eventually. So even if it's a tremendously strong updraft from the storm. So you can kind of see this growing as it translates towards the east. You can see this, and I think this one's an example of a core kind of coming down. It goes up and then it starts to come down as well. It's the what goes up must come down, phrase that you suspend a lot of stuff up, eventually it'll come down. If you have high shear, it might be suspended for longer. If you have a low shear day and you have a lot of high reflectivity, when it comes down, that's when you'd be concerned about something like a microburst or instances of hail at the ground. And we have access to a lot more data than what's shown in most apps. Some are more advanced than others. There's also computer software that the public can download that displays in a way similar to what we're looking at. But we are also looking at multiple radar sources at once as well, and other ways to look at it. So the way to interpret, so back to the question about velocities, how this is determined from radar. So Doppler radar velocity, and that's speed and direction. And in the base velocity scale, it extends more on the apps, and when we start to get into that, you'll see a larger range, but in general, it's the warm colors, the reds in this case, are the moving away from the radar, and then the greens are moving towards the radar. And interestingly enough, velocity images will look different every day based on the prevailing wind direction. So we think of it as like outbounds, inbounds, and the patterns that are formed by this air moving away can tell us if we're looking at potential for straight line winds, microbursts, or rotation. So when you have just directly towards the radar, that's a west wind. When you have the greens or the cool colors coming towards the radar, that's a wind from the north blowing towards the south. And then a southwest wind would look like that. So that's the basics of it. But then the color scale, I definitely recommend like learning, you know, the scale can go up into the hundreds in terms of knots on the knot scale. So this is just a more simplistic slice of the basics of it, just to kind of help explain how you learn on it. So again, we could inflow air patterns based on the velocity pattern. So when the air is moving out from each other, so if like the inbounds and the outbounds are moving away from each other, that means that something needs to come down, air needs to come down to replace the air that's moving away, and that's where you get your microburst. Air circulation is rotation, is air coming together. So when you see the inbounds and outbounds coming together, that's a sign of developing rotation. We see acceleration and deceleration of air. So I will now show you a couple of common patterns here. So this will show you, here's our radar. So you always got to think where the radar is. In this case, this is just based off the NWSK lot radar. So, and we're focusing on storms out in that area. So the warmer colors are outbounds with respect to the radar. The green colors out in western DeKalb County, Illinois, are moving towards the radar. So you can see that there. So, and then here's from last week's storm again, here's a really clear example from the radar's perspective. So the radar's over here, inbound, outbound coming together. There's a rotation. And when it's closely together like that and really intense color, so that's why I mentioned it's important that you don't think that that's how it's only in that 64 plus or minus 64 knot, is that when you get into really intense rotation, you see stuff like that. And in the case of this storm as well, there would be a debris ball right here, but on the reflectivity. But yeah, this was probably at near its most intense when it was producing that high, at least high NDO3 damage. So right there is your rotation, pretty clearly there. And when you have the high velocities in and out right up next to each other, we call that gate-to-gate velocity couplets. I don't think that's a specific, there may not be a specific thing on here, but I give it to you. So that helps you infer. So when we issue a radar-based tornado warning, we're making an assessment that, you know, atmospheric conditions, favorability-wise, that things rise to the level of needing to put a warning out so that we have lead time when a tornado actually occurs. Because if we wait for the tornado to actually occur, we gave no lead time, right? So the tornado did strike without warning if it happens before we get the warning out. So that's what our assessment is here, is we're trying to time it when we're seeing things that are pointing towards this happening. This certainly was, you know, this was right over Roma Park. This was, you know, the tornado was at one of its most intense points, certainly again up into Lake Village. Trying to get the. This is not loud. Can you hear it at all? No. Let me stop this and see if I can get. Let me see if I can go a little higher on the volume on the computer itself. Maybe that'll help. Yeah, a little bit. All right, back to the slideshow. Better? No. 60 to 70 mile an hour winds right
So
there.
why don't we go ahead and draw the warning for this one? When our meteorologist determined that a warning is needed, we use a program called WarnGen,
This is called WarnGen.
short for warning generation. And what it does is it allows us to really draw severe colors for warnings. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna use this tool here to track the leading edge of a particular storm. And what it does is it actually creates sort of a first guess of the polygon shape that we're gonna need. And we have the ability to really select and draw, however big or small we want the polygon to be. In this particular example, we're gonna say we have pretty high confidence that the storm's gonna be severe all the way to Lake Michigan shore. So we can create a fairly large severe thunderstorm warning for this particular case. We could also choose to include or not include certain counties. There's sort of a science to polygonology, as we call it, but we really are trying to estimate how this storm's gonna evolve over the next hour, really the duration of the warning, so that this one warning can cover the whole area.
Yeah, we're trying to get lead time, but also not have to reissue as well.
If you severe thunderstorm warning, we can choose the duration to whatever duration we need. In this particular example, I'm gonna do this warning for 1 hour. And we select the basis of the warning. More often than not, it's Doppler radar indicates, so we're gonna go ahead and select that. In this particular example, I'm concerned about damaging winds perhaps as high as 70 miles an hour, so I'm gonna go ahead and select 70 miles an hour. We're gonna say the storm isn't producing any hail, but if it was, we can select that as well. There's all sorts of additional things we can put into a warning for this particular example. We're just gonna ignore that. So what we do is we let the system create the warning for us. It automatically generates all the.
It's the inside knowledge now.
So what our meteorologists do is we spot check all the information, make sure it's correct. So in this particular case, the counties are what we want to have inside of this warning. The storm is located in North Aurora, stated 60 miles an hour, that's correct. Our hazard is 70 mile per hour wind gusts. Now we have the ability to include additional information in the warning as we see fit. So in this particular example, we can manually type in that the strongest winds are moving into Naperville. Just for example, we can really put whatever.
Naperville is where I live.
Customize it as the warning. There's all sorts of other information included in the warning. A lot of this at the bottom of the warning is for systems to sort of pull in our warnings and things that we parse about. But this is really how we create severe thunderstorm warnings. So let's go ahead and send this out so that it's going out to the world. That's how we do a severe thunderstorm warning. Now the reality is our meteorologists are trained to issue severe thunderstorm warnings. It's something that they need to issue the warning to send as little as facts, some of us can actually do it in as few as 20 seconds. And the reason why we're trained to do it that fast is every second counts, especially when it comes to tornadoes. We want to make sure that we get the warning out as fast as we can. So why don't we just do a quick example of what we would do for a tornado warning. Let's say we're looking at this storm that's in north of Union County in Fort Lauderdale Airport. See a little bit of rotation indicated by radar that can tilt up from the mid levels of the storm. Right now we're looking at about 8,000 feet in the storm. Our radar is actually supposed to be tight rotation, so this would be a good candidate for a tornado warning. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend
This
that
is an actual tornado warning process.
tornado warning.
So from looking back to the velocity data, this is what we're looking at, it tilting up and down, looking at signs that we're seeing tightening rotation. My coworker's very fast, faster than me.
That took about, I don't know, 30 seconds to get out. Sometimes we can get out even faster. We just want to show that the speed at which we can get these warnings out every second matters. So that's a quick look behind the scenes for how the National Weather Service meteorologists issue.
And after this was actually the event I referenced earlier from the Naperville Woodridge, Illinois tornado. After this frame, the rotation tightened up with our original severe warning storm, and then went on to produce an EF3 tornado that caused destruction in portions of Naperville and the Woodridge corridor. So it happened really fast, really fast. We went from basically, like watching it to it tightened up, and then we also had a sign of a tornado debris signature on our radar that we could see. And we went to confirm tornado, and then within about another 5 to 10 minutes of that, it was a destructive tornado. So it was a very quick process as that occurred. Yeah. And now we get to our forecast scenario. So this is the closing out segment. Get to look even further inside what we do at the NWS. So there's an interactive part of this. I didn't mention it earlier, but I think probably a good way, since we're coming closer to the end, as you get up, stretch before you head home. So we're examining the ingredients, performing our assessment, and then taking it and monitoring, taking action. So ingredients for severe weather, right? The blue colors on this map, definitely moisture. That's high dew point air. Dew points are a better term than relative humidity to use, just so you're not gonna spend a ton of time, but your high dew points, 70 plus on the hot, humid days, the dew point's a good indication of how much moisture versus, because relative humidity is tied to usually it's going to be higher in the morning usually because, it's based on the difference between the air temperature and the dew point temperature. So cooler in the morning, you're gonna have higher humidity, but dew points are gonna stay pretty steady during the day, pretty constant. Then this is the measure of instability right here. So very large CAPE, the scale that it's called convective available potential energy, and it's a numeric scale. And the higher you get, the larger the value of larger values of instability. So again, the warm colors. So that it's kind of all ties together. The warm colors, the cooler colors. So you have instability. Do you have a disturbance coming overhead to trigger thunderstorms? Looks like we got that system. This is up at about 15,000 feet up. We have an approaching disturbance at that level. And then this is our metric that shows how much wind shear. And in this case, the numbers adequate for severe weather is like 30, 35 knots. In this case, it's 50 to 60 knots, so yes, shear. So we appear to have, all ingredients needed for severe weather in the mid-Mississippi River Valley and Western Great Lakes. Our Storm Prediction Center outlook, this was from July 2024. So the update in the afternoon with a red level 4 moderate. Again, I don't really like the term, but level 4 moderate risk or level 4 or 5 threat. And this is how we messaged it at the office. So this was a high-end situation. We were either expecting tornado-like wind speeds and/or tornadoes. So, it's kind of pick your poison sort of thing. So, there were just going to be corridors of destructive straight-line winds and/or the corridors of noteworthy tornado damage itself, and fast movements up to 55 miles an hour. So, do you have anything planned for that time of day after 6 o'clock? Do you have any plans to travel? Do you, you want to keep tabs on where loved ones are, stuff like that? This is stuff that you want to be thinking of when we give timings like this. Our hazardous weather outlook, all high levels there for tornado, damaging winds, and flash flooding. Hail not as high, but still not zero. And yeah, don't forget the other trusted sources that you can get information from. So we're just expecting a dangerous line of storms at this point. Then Storm Prediction Center, going back through the what to expect portion, put out that mesoscale discussion. Then they issued a tornado watch for this particular event. It started as a severe watch, and then we became really concerned that it was becoming quite favorable for tornadoes as well. And we coordinated with the Storm Prediction Center to have that be a tornado watch for the area. And then the timing graphic that we put out earlier. So, having multiple redundant ways to receive weather warnings, staying tuned for updates, and taking shelter if you need to take action. Monitoring mode, this is when the line of storms entered northwestern Illinois crossing the Mississippi River. You can see there's already warnings in effect, and lots of what we were showing in terms of higher velocities and probably areas where you could pick out some velocity, some rotational signatures as well. This radar here is the first one we're using, is the Davenport, the Quad Cities radar. So you can see that punch of wind And then, there's a red box there where there's an area of tightening rotation. This is getting closer to home here. So here we're using K-Lot. We put out larger warnings, and then we're also becoming concerned about rotation. And it was really becoming evident that it was in a lot of locations at this point. As it got closer and closer, as it got into Northeast Illinois and approached Northwest Indiana, it was just basically like, it was a combination of all the above. So it became pretty challenging. So we had larger severe thunderstorm warnings, and then we ended up doing, several tornado warnings as well. Oh, it's supposed to be interactive? I guess I was supposed to ask questions on it, but it's the first time I've done this one through. I've done all these scenarios, so I guess we can. If you have any questions on it, maybe we could do that part. Like, since it's 8:18, I think we're pretty much at the end, and we have some time left, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have. So I think that was part of why I sped through it a little bit. But this event, probably remember it, and with 32 tornadoes in this particular event. A lot of survey work, a lot of post-event work, satellite data, work with emergency management to figure out what happened. You can see that longer track there that went south of here through Lake County and into Porter County. That was an EF1 tornado. We did have one EF2 tornado with this particular event. This was the, in our forecast area, this was the most significant numbers-wise single tornado producing event in our area. So 32 tornadoes was the most we'd had in one single severe weather event. So to go back to this, the ingredients, it's really more of like getting familiar with different ways to know about it, but a lot of this might be explained as well by the meteorologist. So I'll leave this stuff up on the screen and take time to answer any questions you might have. And before I forget to, thank you again for being a great audience and Indiana University Northwest to providing this venue in Lake County Emergency Management for having us. And being great partners, and everything that you did last week, it's sobering, honestly, to be out there. I was out there twice last week in Kankakee County, so it's sobering to see what this storm did, and it changes. It's life-changing events when you get hit by the worst of it, but seeing it also affects your life as well. Gives purpose for certainly what we do, but to understand what people went through. So still this whole week. So the event was Tuesday. Wednesday did the first survey. Then when I went back out there Friday, did a more extensive, kind of more in-depth review. This has felt like at least 2 weeks in time lapsing, even though it's just been about a week. So, but yeah, thank you for your time and everything. But I definitely have some time for questions, even if it goes a little bit past 8:30. If you do need to leave at 8:30, that's the time we promise. I don't know if we have to vacate the premises after that, but I'd be happy to stick around a little bit longer. But anybody raise your hand in the back?
Okay, so.
Yes.
I just wanna make sure I'm correct. So at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, once a month, we get this, emergency